I'd like to inform you again that we provide the interpretation device. You can get the device at the back. So we will provide the interpretation from Indonesian language to English and vice versa. Thank you. afternoon, Ibu Lili. Afternoon, everyone. His and Her Excellency Commissioners of Komisi Pemberantasan Korupsi, Republik Indonesia. In this room today, we have Vice Chairman Ibu Lili Pintauli Siregar, Chair of the G20 Anti-Corruption Working Group Bapak Muhammad Hadiana, respectable delegates of G20 member countries, observers and partners, honorable speakers and moderators, respectable all participants from Indonesian government, civil society, and academics who join us today in this meeting room and online. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Bernadette Saraswati. I am Cooperation Specialist from Komisi Pemberantasan Korupsi, and I will be your master ceremony today. Welcome to today's workshop on public participation and anti-corruption education that is held as the ACWG side event. Ladies and gentlemen, on this occasion, allow me to introduce you to today's agenda. Opening remarks will be delivered by Commissioner of Komisi Pemberantasan Korupsi, Ibu Lili Pintauli Siregar. And then we will start the session 1, Strengthening Public Participation in Combating Corruption, the Good Practices and Lesson Learned. This session will be guided by Chief of the Corruption and Economic Crime Branch, the UNODC, Ms. Brigitte Strobel-Scholl. And then we have 15 minutes break. And then after the break, we will start the session 2, Promoting Quality Education on Ethics and Integrity to Prevent Corruption. That will be guided by Acting Director of Anti-Corruption Section, the AGD Australia, Ms. Marion Barrow-Clough. And also, please be noted that there will be question and answer section after each session. Lastly, this event will be concluded by the G20 ACWG Chair, Bapak Muhammad Hadiana, with his closing remarks. Distinguished delegates, to officially open the workshops, please welcome Ibu Lili Pintauli Siregar to give the opening speech.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, and it is pleasure to me to welcome you in the G20 Anti-Corruption Working Group side event, workshop on public participation and anti-corruption education. It is also a pleasure to be talking with you today, even though we are not yet able to meet in person. I know this format is limitation compared to physical meetings. But I do believe it is important that we as the G20 countries continue to work together to discuss and explore ways to address the problem of corruption. Corruption is an extraordinary crime that has transnational aspect in its nature, with the perpetrators illicit financial flow and the impact go beyond borders. Indeed, corruption has a direct negative impact on the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It impedes progress on social, economic, and environmental targets. The G20, as the biggest global economy forum, promote dialogue to solve various economic challenges, including anti-corruption issues through the G20 Anti-Corruption Working Group. The G20 Anti-Corruption Working Group play an important role on formulating comprehensive recommendations to enhance the effort of G20 countries in the fight against corruption. Through the G20 Anti-Corruption Working Group Action Plan 2022-2024, G20 countries are encouraged to strengthen their commitment to explore ways to raise awareness of corruption among youth and foster a culture of integrity, including education and public participation. Fighting corruption needs the willpower of everyone: the government, organization, communities, and every individual. No single organization or nation can win the war against corruption without the concerted effort and cooperation of the citizenry. Close collaboration between the government and the public is very important to create an effective partnership in the fight against corruption. Our workshop today will be focused in two issues. First, we will discuss on approach and initiative on public participation in anti-corruption program. Participation from all stakeholders, including citizens, academic, civil society, and the private sector, and other non-governmental stakeholders, is important to encourage public dialogues on corruption and raise awareness on the negative impact of corruption. Secondly, this workshop will also focus on sharing experience from country to build the culture of integrity formal and non-formal education. Education has consistently been shown to have a positive impact on public participation, civil society engagement, and enhancing public reporting on corrupt conducts. The special session of the United Nations General Assembly against corruption in June 2021 reaffirms anti-corruption education and training as the core of holistic and multidisciplinary approach to strengthen ethical behavior and to foster a culture that promotes respect for the rule of law and integrity. It also recognized the role of youth as agents of change in creating a culture of zero tolerance for corruption at all levels of society. One important way to enhance the effectiveness of public participation and anti-corruption education is to use technology, increase transparency on the operation of government. The discussion today will also elaborate innovation in using ICTs to promote public participation in preventing corruption, including to enhance transparency in public procurement and to promote public consultation on public policy or legislation. Finally, this is an opportune time for me to declare the official opening of the G20 Anti-Corruption Working Group side event workshop on public participation and anti-corruption education. Lastly, I wish you a fruitful workshop and I wish you have a pleasant stay in Bali. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Ibu Lily, for the opening speech. Ladies and gentlemen, now we proceed to the first session of the workshop. This session will be guided by Ms. Bridget Strobel-Shaw as the moderator. Ms. Bridget is the Chief of the Corruption and Economic Crime Branch at the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime. The branch is responsible for providing policy, normative, and substantive support to states for the implementation of the UNCAC. Prior to this post, Ms. Bridget held several positions in the UN system, both at the headquarters and in the field. On issues related to crime prevention and criminal justice, including on organized crime, counterterrorism, juvenile justice, and violence against women. Ms. Bridget is a lawyer by training. Now we invite the moderator to come to the stage. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the warm welcome and the introduction. It's my pleasure to be here with you today and to moderate this very important session, which brings together three issues: the participation of society, transparency, and the use of information technology. As you all know, the UN Convention Against Corruption dedicates an article to the participation of society, Article 13, and we have seen great leading by example by the G20 on bringing together civil society, academia, and the private sector in partnering against corruption. And we look forward to this discussion today and for advancing this issue. Also, the issue of awareness raising and the use of ICT has just been discussed in the anti-corruption working group of the UN, the working group on prevention, which was held 2 weeks ago, and we have seen a very interactive discussion, probably most participation that we have seen in a very long time. So I very much look forward to repeating this discussion this afternoon with the delegates here, but also with the panelists. It's better? Good. So with that, I would like to invite our distinguished panelists this afternoon to join me on the podium or virtually. I will start with our virtual participant, Mr. Ryan Cassidy. He's the Director of Procurement and Grants and Information Systems at the Australian Department of Finance. He has worked at the Department of Finance since 2016 across various business and technical teams, and during this time he has worked to deliver technical solutions to achieve streamlined common outcomes for Commonwealth agencies and public users, and he's joining us online. I would like to join now the three panelists who will be joining us in person, starting with Mr. Yang Jae-woon. Please. Please. Yang Jae-woon is the Director of the International Relations Division at the Anti-Corruption and Civil Rights Commission in the Republic of Korea. He has inter alia worked in the Ombudsman Bureau within the Commission And prior to that, he was the Deputy Director of the General Anti-Corruption Division, Corruption Risk Assessment Division, Code of Conduct Division, Anti-Corruption Bureau, Planning and Budgeting Division, Planning and Coordination Office within the Anti-Corruption and Civil Rights Commission. Thank you for joining us. Our next person joining us in person is Mr. Aidan Harris. I don't want to interfere with the nice music. Mr. Harris has been the Senior Advocacy Coordinator at the Open Government Partnership since February 2022, where he coordinates with the country support and thematic teams to design and implement strategies for engaging with multilateral global forums and processes, including the G7, the G20, the Summit for Democracies, and other regional and thematic events. Prior to joining OGP, Aidan worked with the Open Society Foundation on advocacy and advancing access to justice, the rule of law, and government accountability. Welcome. Last but not least, I would like to invite Ms. Nanda Sihombing. Nanda is the Senior Program Manager for Asia at the Open Contracting Partnership. She works on advocacy, implementation, and community building in Asia and the Pacific, tailoring open contracting messages to the local context so that it resonates with regional, national, and local audiences. She works with multiple partners from diverse organizations to accelerate uptake and implementation of open contracting in the region. She also strengthens the capacity of local actors and builds effective partnerships. I'm very pleased to have this panel with me today, and we will be starting presentations of this afternoon panel with Mr. Ryan Cassidy. May I ask Mr. Cassidy, can you hear us? Are you online?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you all hear me okay?
We can hear you, and we can see your presentation. So without further ado, I would kindly ask you to start. Now we can see you.
Perfect. Hi everyone, so thank you for the introduction. So again, I'm Ryan Cassidy, so I'm the Acting Director for the Procurement and Grants Information Systems here at the Department of Finance in Australia. Again, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present my team's data capability and some of the great work we've been undertaking to further expand transparency over procurement and grants information. We've been on a journey for a number of years to improve our systems and platforms to enhance the way we deliver our services, including through the use of enhanced data capabilities. What I'll be running you through today is a live demonstration on how we use data analytics to provide a more comprehensive and complete approach for our wide and varied user base. Before I jump into the demonstration, I'll just be taking you through a bit of background on what we've done so far to get to where we are today. And also throughout my presentation, I'll also be making mention to grants as well as procurement. So if we just pass through to the agenda component. Oh yeah, I can see the slides now, thank you. Just next slide. Sorry, next one. Thank you. So just a bit about what is the AusTender. So AusTender and also GrantConnect are the responsibility of the Department of Finance on behalf of the Australian Government. These systems are cost recovered and then also optional for use by agencies. These systems champion the principles of transparency and they're deeply embedded into the core rules and principles of our frameworks. AusTender dates back around 15 years, with GrantConnect more recently introduced to centralise the grants information across the Australian Government. Sorry, just for the transitions. And sorry, next slide, thank you. So just jumping into a bit of our information work program and some of the work we've been undertaking in the background. So I'll just jump into the next slide. So quietly in the background, we've been working extremely hard to resolve a lot of the commentary around one, AusTender being a clunky system to use, and also being quite difficult to undertake data analysis through. So as you'll see, as we go through these transitions of this slide, our work program over the past 3 years has been specifically designed around the basic principles of an information system. We've been running concurrent projects across the information lifecycle, and we're now at a point where we're able to capitalise across this work to provide ease of access across procurement and grants information. So what you'll see in the middle here is the number of projects that we've been undertaking across the last 3 years. And over on the right is our target state that we've wanted to achieve across the platforms. So we wanted to ensure across our technology foundation that we had a secure and reliable and scalable technology stack. Through the data, we wanted to ensure the data was reliable to our key stakeholders. The information was accessible to both our public and Commonwealth users. The knowledge was relevant, and also being able to provide wisdom and speed across our key consumers. If I just jump into the next slide. Perfect. So as you'll see through the transitions here, so this diagram depicts our key information consumers across both AusTender and Grant Connect, and we've split them into 2 key streams. So I'll just run through the all transitions, apologies for them. All right, I think it's a couple of clicks through before we get there, sorry. So on the left, we've got our government users, and over on the right are our non-government users. So as you can see, when combining procurement and grants information into a single location, provides great insights into a very large proportion of government resource consumption, including insights into historical, current, and future government objectives that are delivered throughout these frameworks. So just go to the next slide, please. Perfect, thank you. So just a bit of history around AusTender and kind of where we were 22 years ago. I'll just jump into the next slide. So AusTender was originally designed to replace a paper gazette. Okay. And through this paper gazette, it was originally published as government gazettals through approach to markets and contract notices. So a big step was made. So if we just jump into the next slide. So AusTender was designed to replace that piece of paper and holds data going back to 2004. As I mentioned before, Grant Connect was designed in 2017 to mirror a similar approach of AusTender and to streamline the publication of grants. So a bit about how we ensure quality data. I'll just run through a high-level process of how a government agency awards a contract. If we go into the next slide. So on point 1, and there's a couple of transitions here, apologies. So on point 1, a government agency will award a contract. Just go, yep. And then from the awarding a contract, an agency will publish this into the agency systems. And once in that system is automatically available onto AusTender. Once it's available on AusTender and published by the agencies, it's automatically made available publicly. And once also made available publicly, it's also sent through to the OCDS API, which is heavily consumed through international and national bodies for undertaking data analysis. And it's also concurrently made available to agency reports on point 5, which is then available for agencies to undertake stewardship over their data. So I'll just jump into the next slide. Perfect, thank you. So across our information delivery platform, there was a number of key targets that we wanted to achieve. The first one was autonomy for our finance staff. So across the platforms, there's roughly 1 transaction per minute. So it can be quite difficult to undertake analysis and curate that data. We also wanted to ensure wanted to improve user interactions, produce reports once, but being able to continuously use them for data analysis, having more automated stewardship, having a capability that we could expand analysis across, that would also reduce reporting risk, and had the ability to embed stories and narrative to provide information around policies and data that support policies. So what I'll just do now is a quick live demo on these systems. I'm just trying to present. Not sure if you're able to see that sharing content.
Ryan, we see a slide which says for the public, easily access and engage with data supported with narratives. Is that the one?
Sorry, I'm just trying to present my screen.
Okay.
It doesn't seem to be letting me present. So I can probably talk through this slide a bit. So for our public users, what we've been able to do is actually embed public reports to our users, which provide them further transparency around the data that are actually published by agencies. Whereas historically, we've actually created and designed at a transactional level, so we give you a list of transactions for contracts through our new help and information site available on AusTender. Our users are now given a full 10-year overview of all the data available, and they're able to actually undertake further analysis, which provides them more support in undertaking their data analytics and also provides further transparency over the data. For agency users, so if we just jump into the next slide, it was a very similar approach where we embedded data analytics for our agency users, and on this they're able to actually undertake and measure policy outcomes. They're also able to undertake trends and reporting analysis on their contracts that are being published by their users. I'll just jump into the final slide. So a couple of future objectives that we're able to do throughout making this data further transparent is we're able to also measure our policy outcomes. We're improving user interactions across the site. And then also through making these reports publicly available, it also acts as a fraud preventative by people being able to undertake more data analysis across procurement grant information. So again, I just want to thank you all for having me today. Apologies I wasn't able to share my screen, but again, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ryan, and a really interesting presentation on the progress that has been made. I think there will probably be quite some questions on how often the system's been used and impact later on. Certainly, I would have some questions to that effect, but thank you very much, and apologies also from our side for the technical difficulties. With that, I would like to give the floor to our next governmental panelist representing government, Mr. Won Young-jae, and you'll be addressing challenges in promoting public participation, please.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Young-jae Won, Director for International Relations Division of Antikorupsi and Civil Rights Commission of Korea. ACRC is the preventative anti-corruption body in Korea, developing and implementing effective anti-corruption policies that promote the participation of society. I'm truly pleased and honored to be here today. Let me now begin my presentation about anti-corruption participation of citizens in Korea. Next, please. First, legal ground for participation. Article 13 of UNCHC specifies promotion of people's participation, as you know, and Article 12 of Korea's Anti-Corruption Act stipulates cooperation with and support for individuals, corporations, and organizations related to the HCRC's anti-corruption activities as the function of the Commission. Next, please. My presentation today has largely two main topics. Firstly, I will explain about the establishment of governance for public participation in Korea, and then how voices are reflected in anti-corruption policies. Secondly, I will introduce programs for raising anti-corruption awareness among young people and facilitating their participation. Next, please. Let me begin with the first topic, formation of governance for public participation. Next, please. This slide shows the background of establishing a public-private consultative body in Korea. In 2017, Korea's Corruption Perceptions Index of Transparency International went down to a low level. Such trend was analyzed to be due to limitations of government-centered, government-led anti-corruption policies. So from 2018, we pushed it to establish a public-private consultative body in which representatives of different sectors of society participate. Diverse anti-corruption topics that are hard to be raised by the government itself are expected to put on the table for discussion. Next, please. As a result of such efforts, the Public-Private Council for Transparent Society was established in March 2018. The Council's legal basis is a Prime Minister's directive. It discusses diverse matters related with public participation in anti-corruption policies. Its function includes anti-corruption policy suggestions from businesses and civil society, monitoring and evaluation on the collection of people's opinions, as well as implementation of integrity practice movements, including education and public relations. Next, please. This shows the composition of the council. It has about 14 members who discuss diverse items in its agenda. Those people are representatives of 6 major sectors of society, including civil society organizations, economic circles, media, academia, and occupational associations. Next, please. This is about sub-organization of the council. 6 sub-committees are operated to support policy discussions in a greater detail. They find out anti-corruption issues in 6 categories of general affairs, public policies, economy, education, local government, and civil and society. Then the agenda is tabled for deliberation after discussion. The subcommittee holds monthly meetings, and the HCRC plays a role of its secretariat that supports overall operation of the council and subcommittees. Next, please. 17 local governments nationwide also run their own regional public-private councils for transparent society. The municipal and provincial councils discuss corruption issues of their own regions with participation of representatives of different sectors in respective regions' societies. Nationwide, total of 526 organizations, including civic groups, belong to those local councils. Next, please. The council has proposed 20 anti-corruption policies since 2018. The suggestions were mostly regarding areas in Korean society which are especially prone to corruption or matters that have become social issues. They were deliberated as the agenda of the council and officially proposed as anti-corruption policies. Next, please. Out of them, let me explain the enactment of the Conflict of Interest Act in Korea. The Korean government has made continuous efforts since 2013 for the enactment of a unified act on the prevention of conflict of interest that focuses mainly on reporting on and recusal of persons with private interest. The passage of the legislation bill at the National Assembly of Korea had been delayed year after year, so the ACRC introduced relevant rules in a presidential decree in 2018. Then, in 2020, the bill was submitted again to the newly elected National Assembly. Next, please. The Public-Private Consultative Council for Transparent Society. Let me check the slide. Can I see the previous slide? Yes. Oh, next slide is right. Yes, please. Sorry. The Public-Private Consultative Council for Transparent Society selected the legislation as the key anti-corruption agenda in the beginning of 2021. A resolution was proclaimed in March 2021 to urge a swift passage of the legislation bill that was pending at the National Assembly. The resolution was a clarification of Korean civil society's voice and demand, which claims that the enactment of the act is urgently needed for better anti-corruption achievement in Korea. Next, please. Then 1 month later, in April, the bill passed the National Assembly and the act was proclaimed in May 2021. After 1 year, it was finally enforced in May 2022. The enactment of the act is meaningful as it is the fruit of 8-year-long efforts since 2013. Such achievement was possible thanks to civil society's strong will and demand. Next, please. Now, the second topic is participation of the youth. Next, yeah. ACRC surveyed young people about corruption perceptions in Korean society in 2020. The result shows the younger people tend to think about corruption more negatively than general adults. 61% versus 48%, as you can see. This implies it is very important to raise young generation's awareness of anti-corruption policies. Next, please. Let me introduce several programs for the youth. First one is the Special Integrity Lecture Series for college students. This is run by the Anti-Corruption Training Institute, ACTI, under ACRC. Special lectures are given for 880 students, college students from 8 universities across the nation during May to July this year. The subject of the lecture series include not only anti-corruption policies, but also diverse topics such as ethical business management. Next, please. The next program is the 2030 Integrity Talent Academy. This program is an educational course designed to raise young generation's interest in corruption issues and to nurture integrity expertise among young members of society. Approximately 50 young people aged between 19 and 34 are given opportunities to participate in 8-week-long customized education. Next, please. The course has 3 main parts of basic integrity capabilities, subject research, and integrity literacy. The course consists of interesting curriculum such as lectures on international anti-corruption trends and norms, discussion on dilemma situations, and integrity live concert, which are designed for easy and fun understanding of integrity. Those who get good scores are given opportunities to participate in diverse policies of ACRC. Next, please. The last one is the People's Monitoring Group. The group examines and assesses anti-corruption policies from the perspective of people to enhance the practicality and awareness of those policies. It is composed of the general public, including college students, office workers, and small business owners. It began with 50 members in 2018, and now 224 members are working for the group this year. Next, please. It carries out diverse activities such as questionnaire, surveys, policy suggestion, participation in panel discussions, and so on. Good suggestions of the group are brought to subcommittee of the council for further discussion. The group has suggested various anti-corruption policies so far, including fairness in provision of state scholarship, establishment of a fair grade evaluation system at colleges, and enactment of a unified law for strengthening of protection and compensation of public interest whistleblowers. Let me stop my presentation here, and thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the interesting presentation. I particularly thought the survey you did in 2020, which shows the different perception among youth and adults, was very interesting. And of course also how, in fact, the Transparency International Perception Index triggered reforms in South Korea. With that, I'm very excited to actually pass over to our civil society part of the panel and to invite Mr. Aidan Harris. You'll be speaking about the implementation of open government in anti-corruption policy. Please, Mr. Harris. Wherever you like, thanks.
Good afternoon. Honourable Commissioner, members of the working group, thank you very much for inviting me to speak here today on behalf of the Open Government Partnership. I'll begin with a brief overview of the Open Government Partnership and then talk about some of the examples of best practice that has been seen through the OGP platform that demonstrate strong participation in tackling corruption. The next slide, please. Open Government Partnership is an international multi-stakeholder initiative launched in 2011 by heads of state representing 8 countries, that is Indonesia, Brazil, Mexico, South Africa, Philippines, Norway, USA, and the UK. And these heads of state came together to create a platform that allows government and civil society working collaboratively to design locally relevant national action plans where commitments are turned into actions, and then the impacts of those actions can be tracked and evaluated by an independent reporting mechanism. That's the essence of the OGP model. Next slide. So since that founding moment, OGP has grown as more governments recognize the benefits of a participatory model for implementing their international commitments. Today, 77 national governments are members of OGP, along with more than 100 local governments at the city, state, or provincial, other subnational level. And together, these governments have made more than 4,500 commitments over the last 10 years. And these commitments are implemented through more than 280 national action plans on a biennial cycle. And those action plans are co-created with the involvement of more than 3,000 civil society organizations. And it's that principle of co-creation and participation that we're discussing today. Next slide, please. Now, the case for stronger participation in tackling corruption has never been more clear than it is today. As the world recovers from COVID-19 pandemic, countries are spending trillions of dollars on that recovery, but we know that up to 25% of the value of public contracts may be being lost to corruption. Meanwhile, criminals and corrupt officials can evade international sanctions by laundering money through anonymous shell corporations, and illicit financial flows, so-called dark money, helps to fuel instability and conflict. Now, the Anti-Corruption Working Group has made significant progress in helping countries to tackle some of these challenges by setting ambitious standards in recent years. But setting standards and making commitments is not enough. Often implementation is lagging behind, and without an effective monitoring and reporting mechanism, it's difficult to accurately assess how much impact is actually being achieved. The working group's current action plan calls for enhanced efforts to ensure timely implementation of commitments already made and to monitor progress. And that's where the participatory model, followed by OGP member countries, can be helpful. Next slide, please. Now, 13 G20 countries use the OGP as a platform to advance their commitments on tackling corruption and improving participation. The value of doing so was recognized in the Working Group's 2017 action plan, which identified OGP as a key dialogue partner for G20 members. Those countries are taking forward the Working Group's high-level principles by delivering domestic action through their OGP action plans, and in that way, OGP can be the bridge between global forums like G20 and others and domestic national implementation. Members here will recall the 2016 London Anti-Corruption Summit. 20 OGP members chose to embed the commitments they made at that summit into their OGP action plans, and the data shows that this worked. Recent analysis by Transparency International on the progress made since the summit highlights that embedding commitments into an OGP action plan has strengthened implementation. Next slide. I'll focus now on 3 areas where governments have shown particular progress on G20 priorities by following a participatory model. Firstly, on fiscal openness, data from OGP implementation shows that opening up fiscal and spending processes is a powerful tool for risk mitigation and an important safeguard against corruption. This is especially important, as we know, in the context of money being spent on recovery from COVID and for the economic stimulus package. Now, unsurprisingly, fiscal openness commitments are some of the most frequently implemented across all of OGP. 90% of OGP members have made a total of 671 fiscal commitments since 2011, more than any other policy area. And the independent reporting mechanism of OGP, the analysis there shows fiscal openness commitments tend to be much more ambitious and tend to show stronger early results than any other type of anti-corruption commitment. Next slide. Now, I'll highlight one example here. The government of South Africa used its 2016 OGP action plan to commit to publishing fiscal data with citizen participation. And it worked with civil society groups to launch Vulekamali, an online web portal for national and provincial government budgets and expenditure data. But South Africa's commitment went further than just publishing the data. The portal, the initiative, provides educational resources, YouTube videos, a series of nationwide outreach events for people to understand the budget-making process and to understand how they can use the data that's being published. And the South African National Treasury is working with civil society groups to hold so-called hackathons to encourage entrepreneurs and academics, business people and others to do a real deep dive into this data, to see what's going on and try and understand and work out some societal solutions to these problems. This slide shows one example of these hackathons on housing, and the group here discovered that the budget allocation for housing was misleading because it was based on estimated data, which was not directly relevant for measuring local housing needs. The groups used this data to highlight the problem and actually proposed new methodology that could ensure a more efficient allocation of budget resources to meet the local needs. That's the degree of amplification that can be achieved by following a participatory approach. Next slide, please. Some other outstanding examples I'll mention very briefly. Italy created the Open Coesione website, which has published details of more than 1 million expenditure projects. In Georgia, Republic of Georgia created a budget monitor platform, has information, data, also on budget, but also audit findings, and it allows its citizens to actually propose audits based on the information they see in the published data. In the Philippines, citizen participatory audits on major items of public expenditure have helped to save hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'll also add, actually, that fiscal openness is an area of particular interest At the municipal level, OGP local members, city mayors, are finding this is a good way to connect with their citizens. So, for example, Sao Paulo has committed to not just opening up and making its data on expenditure available, but committing funds to training citizens to exercise a public participation role in budgetary oversight. Similarly, in Madrid, has implemented participatory budgeting, asking the public to submit suggestions on how to allocate 100 million euro in funding, and then having a public vote on final proposals. So these are just some of the examples, good practice of leveraging citizen participation to tackle corruption, and they're being taken forward and implemented through the action plans of OGP members. Next slide, please. Turning now to public procurement and contracting, this is another strong area where we see progress. I know we're going to hear from my colleague from Open Contracting in a moment, but very briefly, 86 OGP members have made commitments on open contracting. That includes 11 from the G20. And the data from this implementation shows that 1/3 of all open contracting commitments that are implemented through OGP action plans result in significant changes to the way in which governments award public contracts. So we see a structural change here. As a result of implementing an open contracting commitment, governments actually then change the policy based on the data that's shown. And the analysis, again, from the independent reporting mechanism of OGP shows that the open contracting commitments lead to improvements in government openness at nearly twice the rate of any other type of commitment. The next slide, please. So to highlight another example, this time from Ukraine, Ukraine's action plan included commitments to establish 2 new web portals called Prozoro and Dozoro. They allow citizens to see how public contracts are awarded, and before the recent conflict began, these websites were receiving 100,000 visits every single month. And that creates this community, a community of citizen auditors that can go deep into the data, see what they find. And in the first 3 years of operation that these websites were online, that community of auditors found more than 30,000 violations of contracting process. And we've heard just now from a colleague from Korea that perception of corruption, particularly among young people, and because tackling that perception is often just as important as tackling the corruption itself, this initiative in Ukraine actually succeeded in cutting in half the proportion of the population that believed government contracts were corrupt. Next slide. Finally, on beneficial ownership. Now, the G20 is committed to lead by example on beneficial ownership transparency. There's been some really great progress in recent years. 9 members of the G20 have committed to establishing registers of beneficial ownership through their OGP action plans. UK was one of the first to commit to an open ownership register of companies in 2016. Here in Indonesia, the government has demonstrated leadership by establishing a beneficial ownership register and is now strengthening that implementation through the current OGP action plan. Next slide. And we also know that business is strongly in favor of this as well. The B20 observed in its policy paper to the G20 in 2017, public registers can create a more competitive market. If G20 members move together, they can help establish a norm to drive change in other parts of the world where B20 companies face significant corruption risks. Next slide. But there's more to do in meeting the G20's goal of being leaders in beneficial ownership. This slide suggests a few of the important steps that members can take, one of which is the Beneficial Ownership Leadership Group. Now, the OGP is a co-convener of this group of countries that is dedicated to showing global leadership on beneficial ownership transparency. Currently, that group comprises Armenia, Kenya, Latvia, Norway, Slovakia, only the UK and Mexico joining from G20 so far. Other G20 members who wish to show leadership on beneficial ownership, very welcome to join that group. And some of the aims of that group are shown here, ways of promoting best practice. So, for example, ensuring alignment to other commitments like the EITI, Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, ensuring compliance with other standards like the Financial Action Task Force standards, which were revised earlier this year, and where relevant, the EU's Anti-Money Laundering Directive. Secondly, ensuring that data is published in a common standard and format, such as one way to do this is by implementing the beneficial ownership data standard, and that will allow cross-comparability across borders to detect transnational corruption. As I said before, leveraging the value of business, journalists, and so on to create that community that can actually use the data in a participatory way, and then linking beneficial ownership transparency to other platforms like procurement. Next slide. So some conclusions here. The working group, anti-corruption working group, should continue to set high-level principles on anti-corruption, but also maintain that focus on implementing commitments and monitoring progress. By following an open and participatory approach, G20 countries are more likely to yield stronger results in their anti-corruption policies. Resources and examples from across OGP membership can inform and guide G20 countries on effective ways of implementing commitments and monitoring outcomes. Also using other high-level opportunities, UNCAC, UNGAS, Summit for Democracies, etc., where relevant, these can help to drive forward implementation and ensure commitments made at different forums are joined up and connected to domestic action. Finally, of course, G20 members who are also members of OGP can use their OGP action plans to embed the anti-corruption working group's high-level principles into domestic action. So making progress on tackling corruption requires more than just standards and commitments. Opening up the process and involving people following examples of best practice that are showing strong results in some countries can ensure the principles of this working group translate into real progress on the ground. Thank you again for the invitation to be here today. Please be assured OGP is ready to continue to support members of the anti-corruption working group in taking forward their commitments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Aidan, for outlining the work done by Open Government and also for a call to further action to the G20 countries, what else needs to be done, and especially to emphasize the need in terms of all these activities as we recover from COVID and other crises, and just to remind all of us of the theme of the presidency, recover together, recover stronger. I think a lot of what you said resonates with that. With that, I would like to pass to Ms. Nanda Sihombing to speak about public participation in procurement.
Thank you, Bridget. So thank you to KPK and G20 Indonesia for the opportunity for me to be here on behalf of our global team at the Open Contracting Partnership. Today, I'm going to talk about how technology can help advance public participation in monitoring public procurement. Next slide, please. Why is public procurement so important? First of all, there is a huge amount of money in public procurement. Every year, governments spend $13 trillion on contracts, on everything from pencils and paper to building major infrastructure projects, such as airports, bridges, or highways. This is equivalent to 15% of global GDP. Next slide, please. But procurement is government's #1 corruption risk. 57% OECD foreign bribery cases involve bribes for public contracts. Government around the world spent over $100 billion on COVID-19 contracts in the first 4 months of the pandemic alone. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. COVID has exacerbated these challenges. Crisis situations are ripe for corruption due to soaring funding levels, reduced financial controls, and frequently changing or flood of new actors. Next slide, please. Millions upon millions of dollars have been squandered on questionable purchases, including COVID-19 procurement fund that is spent on chemo, test tubes that turn out to be soda bottles. We have even seen a case where a raspberry farm scored a $6 million contract to supply ventilators. Next slide, please. This is where technology can help. It can be used to fight corruption and increase public participation. First and foremost, standardize your procurement data. Next slide, please. G20 has also recognized the needs for transparent public procurement in anti-corruption effort, including the need for quality, structured, and interoperable data. Next. Using a data standard resolves ambiguity and helps different systems work out how to interpret information, so you can make sense of the data and you can compare like for like. It makes the data interoperable. Next, please. Let's start with procurement data. One way of standardizing it is by applying open contracting data standard. This means standardizing your data sets throughout all contracting processes from start to finish. Next, please. Contracting data is one of many essential data sets that complement each other in the fight against corruption. The more information we can publish, the more pieces of the puzzle are clear, and red flags can be identified effectively. Robust monitoring and prevention requires a strong open government data ecosystem. Next, please. At the OCP, we work with data standards and from there introduce reform. We believe that we can't change what we can't measure. Next, please. Let's talk about how contracting data can be used to identify red flags in public procurement. Next, please. The first story comes from Indonesia. Corruption in procurement costs Indonesia's government up to $4 billion per year. 80% of corruption cases relate to public procurement, and a third of companies indicate that they expect to give gifts in order to secure government contracts. Next, please. But Indonesia is a huge country with a decentralized system. This means when you talk about public procurement, there are multiple levels of government agencies with their own e-procurement system that they have to deal with. It also means that the problem is also decentralized. Next, please. When it comes to procurement, Indonesia spends over $300 billion and is at the top 8 countries who spend the most on public contracts. So, a decentralized countries with over 600 e-procurement system as the top 8 countries of public spender. It is never going to be easy to do oversight. This is when technology comes in. It enables broader public participation. Next, please. LKPP, Public Procurement Agency, who monitors all public procurement activities around the country, collaborated with our partner Indonesia Corruption Watch since 2013. The goal? To help monitor public procurement projects with the help of civil society, journalists, and citizens. They have an agreement where the Public Procurement Agency share data sets with ICW, which is civil society, who will then use it to increase public awareness and participation in monitoring procurement. As a result, next please. This is the example of civil society monitoring platform with red flag indicators that was developed in collaboration with National Public Procurement Agency based on the available existing data sets that are shared with ICW. Next, please. So data and technology is just the beginning. It is a door that opens up participation. How big the door is going to open depends on political will that will lead to meaningful changes. Next, please. And this is how ICW and Procurement Agency use their findings after empowering citizens to use data and analysis published on the Red Flag platform to do the reporting. So real work happens behind the scenes, the actual work of the analysis. Next, please. As we believe transparency is a means to an end and not an end in itself, so why does it matter? It matters because for civil society, the process of requesting procurement information that can take up to 205 days to just 1 minute download. It matters because the journalist needed to do an exhaustive research for maybe a month, cut down to 5-minute search. It also helps the auditors that it can enable more coverages from 10 audits to 20 or 30. One audit sampling that can take up to 2 days now can go to 15 or 30 minutes. So contracting data matters because someone uses it to improve public procurement process. Next, please. One quick story on publishing data helps broaden public participation comes from this local story. A civil society submitted their monitoring findings on irregular local public lighting project to the local e-procurement system where it took place. The procurement processes was then suspended and the project was repeated in the following fiscal year. The case was prosecuted as a corruption offense and the defendant was convicted and sentenced to 16-month imprisonment. It's just one example on when opening up data can help public fight corruption. Next, please. The second story comes from Italy. There's a lot of demand of transparency in Italy. Foreign investors have complained of a lack of transparency and complicated bureaucracy and procurement procedures. And Italy is also the biggest EU recipient funds and spend more than $200 billion annually on public procurement, which accounts for approximately 10% of GDP. Between 2016 and 2019, 74% of cases of corruption in public procurement were linked to irregularities in how tenders were awarded for public works. Next, please. I'm going back to this picture just to show you where Italy's spending is globally. They're sitting at the top 10. Next, please. Now, Italy took the challenges and set a good example. They're one of the first G7 countries to publish a standardized open contracting data, which enables them to use technology to automate some of the analysis from their data sets. They are continuing the leadership in multiple international fora and also showing how to do the real work on the ground. As a context, there are also several good, strong organizations working in the field of public procurement who can then use the published data for their work. Next, please. ANAC, the Italian anti-corruption authority, publishes OCDE's data portal, allowing citizens to download and use bulk datasets like this. Next, please. But we all know that different stakeholders have different objectives and would require different datasets. ANAC's OCDE's data portal is targeted at fostering transparency for CSO, journalists, and auditors, and fostering participation in public procurement for economic operators, especially small, medium enterprises. Next, please. Going back to this point, opening up data and information is the starting point that enables citizens and civil society to participate in the anti-corruption movement. Once countries start publishing information about spending, it allows public to do the work. Next, please. One example is civil society movement called Monithon, that stands for Monitoring Marathon. Monithon works together with Open Coesione, or School of Open Cohesion, part of government initiative to publish all EU investments in Italy. The initiative built capacities of universities, of schools, to provide feedback so institutions can react. Almost 70% of their findings is reported by the media. Next, please. Monithon has been developing tools and methods for enabling the civic monitoring of public funding since 2013. Their report includes information on how the projects are developed, how they are progressing, and what is their impact from the point of view of the final beneficiaries. One of the examples of the result was when high school students in La Terza Puglia find out that the works in their school that was financed with European funds were completed but missing fire certification. They submit a monitoring report and finally get proper fire protection system that was supposed to be there. Next, please. Another tools that can be built because data is published called Appaltipop, a civil society called On Data and their team of data specialists and technicians source the data from Italy's State Anti-Corruption Authority and then help to identify corruption risk, red flags, and aims to send this data back to ANAC to support their investigation. Next, please. Let's go a bit deeper into public participation and how technology not only help fight corruption, but also improve the process of urban development. Next, please. The last story comes from City of Buenos Aires, Argentina. In early 2017, the city government of Buenos Aires launched an ambitious infrastructure investment plan worth more than $3.5 billion to be delivered in 4 years. With increased projects, public complaints also increased. The city government had 2 goals: improve efficiency in the way infrastructure was planned, procured, and delivered, and improve public trust in government. Next, please. But just like anywhere else, the government was fragmented and siloed, operating multiple different systems, platforms, and formats, which made it hard for them to coordinate. Next, please. Citizens were also frustrated because of the disruption faced from public works construction, and there was no visibility as to what was happening or why. So the city government created an open infrastructure portal that joined up key information on infrastructure projects, making it accessible online. Next, please. There are multiple results following data standardization. Focusing on the enabler of public participation, now access to information is much improved. Journalist research is now much faster, to 15 days, and formal information requests from general public go down to just 10 seconds. Next, please. One of the specific examples of how data is being used by the citizen comes from Villa 31, an informal neighborhood of the city of Buenos Aires. It was an area where access to basic services are limited, and the government's ambitious urbanization project made time constraint become a challenge for bottom-up approach. Next, please. Civil society organization called ACwg and the citizens in Villa 31 use that open access to information to advocate for the basic services they need. They analyzed the big data, how many works were there, how much money was there, the main construction companies, etc. They then compared it with the financial reports of the city. They found that many works and money were not reflected in the government platform and then reported to the city government. As a result, the government followed up the citizens' report and decided to strengthen the evaluation and monitoring in the area by creating a centralized unit to consolidate decision-making based on data. They also decided to increase the availability of information on the works in the neighborhood. Next, please. We're talking about technology, so what's with data? Next, please. Why standardizing data is one of the key things to do if we want to enable broader public participation? Next, please. It's because the value of opening up contracting data lies in how it can be used, when it is analyzed and used for decision making. Next, please. Data quality and availability is a challenge in every data-driven work. Technology and opening up access to public participation helps the government themselves to assess how they can improve data quality with the help of civil society. They don't have to do everything by themselves. Next, please. Similar to Indonesia's case, standardizing data in Italy enables civil society help inform the Italian Anti-Corruption Authority on their data quality and availability, and where they should prioritize based on users' needs. Next, please. In Buenos Aires, the data presents some challenges in terms of quality and coverage. But still, even with data quality issues, when data is available, public can start to do the work. Next, please. In conclusion, it's not easy to do data and technology, but we know how to do it, if we want to do it. Standardizing and publishing data opens up collaboration that will help bridge this gap. The key challenge lies in behavioral change, the political will, the change management process engaged by the public participation. Data-driven change management is the core work for us at the OCP. We try to understand the use cases and the theory of change. And we believe what we need to prioritize is to invest the majority of our brain power in making that offline mechanism works. Technology that supports participation and activism, and not the other way around. Next, please. That will be all from me. I'm Nanda Siombing from the Open Contracting Partnership. Over to you, Bridget.
Thank you very much, Nanda, for also showcasing the link between open data and partnership to transparency and finally monitoring and accountability. So thank you very much to all the panelists. I think the floor is now open for questions, comments. Yes, please. And could you please briefly introduce yourself?
Thank you, Brigitte. My name is Dian. I'm from KPK, the Director of Anti-Corruption Training and Education. I'm interested on Mr. Yan's explanation on Integrity Talent Academy. As my understanding, it is for the young only, Mr. Yan from Korea. Okay. My question is, do you have the Integrity Academy for civil servant or public official or other group? If you have that kind of academy, what is the criteria of participant of that academy? Thank you very much.
I'll pass the floor over to.
Yeah, so I think you asked about the academy and what's the criteria for the composition of the academy. And I think the most important criteria for that is their voluntary will. So we recruit and we promote the advertisement of the academy. And when they voluntarily apply for the academy, we can select from the applications. And we value the most important thing, their voluntary will and how they will engage in the academy by their own plan. So the first one, the first important criteria is that, I think, yeah.
Any further questions? Yes, please, in the first row.
Thank you for the opportunity. I would like to ask to Mr. Won from South Korea. I've been asking this for years. My family love K-drama. They always report to me about gratification, conflict of interest in the drama. The question is, how do government of South Korea insert or make communication with filmmakers or drama makers or content writer of the drama to insert the the content about gratification and all about anti-corruption education. This is my question very long time. Thank you very much.
Mr. Wong, please.
I understand that you are interested in how we promote educational materials on TV or other channels. And to raise public awareness on anti-corruption and integrity is very important. And ACTI, the institution for the anti-corruption education, developed various educational materials and provided them to the public through the internet, broadcasting, SNS, and so on. Last year, several integrity contents were produced for the general public and teenagers. Education videos from YouTube influencers and authors, and special lectures on TV from instructors, and web drama service for teenagers. We make some films for raising awareness about anti-corruption, and a mobile application for the integrity educational game for young children. So all the contents are disclosed to the public on YouTube and IPTV VOD services. That's why how we distribute the materials to the public. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And there's another question to Mr. Wong online. Is the implementation to build integrity and anti-corruption values only carried out at the university level in Korea?
Our education is, yes, centered to the university, but we do that in the elementary and middle school students for them. And yes, it is very important because future generation is very the genuine engine for cleaner society. So we focus on young children also. Yes.
Thank you. Yes, please. The delegate from Switzerland has the floor. Coming.
Thank you. I found all the presentations very interesting. Thank you very much. It became clear that it's not enough to just publish data on the internet. It's also very important, perhaps, to build capacity with the media or civil society, the general public, in order for them to be able to analyze the data and to draw information and even build knowledge and wisdom from it. So I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on how you do that, how you build capacity, or if you even provide incentives for people from the general public to mine the data, to go in there, because I guess most of us prefer to spend their leisure time in a different way than doing this work for the general good and the general interest. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin, for that question. Maybe I would start with Nanda. Nanda, if you're ready.
Yes, thank you. So thank you for the very good question. Yes, we believe standardizing data is not enough. Like, someone has to use it in order to make the publication worth it. In terms of incentivizing public, the way OCP works, we see it on two different ways. One is based on what their interest is, and then the second one based on the interest, well, the needs of the one who publishes the data set. So there are like supply and demand, government and citizens. For example, there are some examples mentioned before, like on hackathon. So there are growing numbers of data enthusiasts out there. When you give them examples, and there are a lot of them who want to do social entrepreneurship. So sometimes the work we do with the work in Buenos Aires or in Indonesia, we say, like, look, you're an expert in data initiatives, like some of them are hackers. We have these data sets, but we want to solve how to include better on people with disabilities. And when you give them that specific examples, and they will come up with answers. So sometimes that kind of gaming approach would work for the civic tech society, because there are growing numbers of them at the moment, especially with the big data approach. And when we talk about the inclusion for the marginalized group, and it always best to make it thematic, and that's when data quality is important. For example, in the city of Buenos Aires, the government publishing like every data sets there are on urbanization, but really the people around there just needs to know where the water is installed, like where the piping are. So the gap between those who publishes the data and those who actually need it, the citizens, there needs to be something that we call intermediary and intermediary, and that's when I think the government can work together with intermediary and intermediaries, because it is hard to work directly with the citizens, right? Like you need someone to help translate the data that is published and help to translate what the needs are from the public so that it can match in the middle. I hope that explains. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to come in as well, Aidan?
Yeah, I would say you certainly need a strong civil society, a civic space environment in which people can do this. But there is appetite out there. There's huge untapped potential among activists, civil society, journalists to dive into big data. Some of the biggest stories that have broken in global media headlines over the last decade have involved huge data dumps, WikiLeaks, the Panama Papers, that have made stories for commanding headlines for weeks and months, and these are enormous amounts of data that journalists and others can go through. And you do need to support them with that space to be able to do that. But even businesses will find an incentive in getting competitive advantage by understanding where government tenders are and where there are gaps, and they can offer to fill those gaps. So there's an incentive there as well. But I do think ways in which we can support that is to get it to a wider group who are not, like as you say, not spending their leisure time obsessed with big data. There's a really powerful storytelling element to this. Again, something journalists can do, but others can do as well, is being able to translate data dumps, open data, into a story that matters to the individual. And once people can start doing that, then they begin to relate to why this stuff matters, and they will take an interest in it themselves. But we see amongst, particularly, as we said, young people and other students are very keen to get to grips with open data that they've never had before, and to be able to play a part in their society.
Ryan, I don't know, do you want to come in as well?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with all the panelists' comments. I think from our perspective, we've seen a massive increase in the number of users that are heavily interested in procurement data. Since publishing our site, have actually seen a massive reduction in the amount of people that are actually asking for the information, and have actually seen an 80% increase in the use of people jumping in and actually undertaking their own analysis over us providing them those reports.
Thanks. And before I give the floor to Youngji, maybe I can give you the next question, not online, because it relates also to Korea and to the question asked by Switzerland. How effective is building anti-corruption values in universities in Korea? What is the method to build anti-corruption values in universities in Korea?
Thank you for the question, and I want to add something to the question before. I understand the incentives for the participation of citizens. The most important thing is what they said is implemented in policy. When they see their voices are reflected in policies, it is a huge incentives for them, and we operate in this context representative digital portal for direct participation in the policy-making process. It is called People's Idea Box. And when a citizen suggests an idea for the anti-corruption policies or any ideas about public services, it can go through the process of discussion. And when it is a good idea, it survives and get voting from majority of citizens. So the idea can be implemented by the minister or central government when they are chosen. So I think this process is one of the tools to incentivize the participation of citizens. And the next question, let me answer briefly. We are giving educations to university students, and yes, they are feeling a sense of good participation, and they can enhance their understanding of anti-corruption policies as well as about the serious of corruption. So yes, it is effective, I think, and the method will be answered in detail in the later, I think. Yeah.
At the next session. There's one more question online. As a representative from an NGO, one of the essential things is to get support from the government, but that becomes the big obstacle to getting it. How are the strategies, what are the government strategies of their commitments to support? Now I'm getting confused with the question. How are the strategies, the government commitment support from the local government? Do you want to make an attempt? Because I'm a bit lost on the second part.
I think what the online question is asking is like, what are the strategies from the government to help support the local government? Maybe it is in the context of the centralized country when a national system is different from the local system. So whatever national initiatives might be different with the local capacities, and how do the countries with the centralized system help bridge the gap? If I'm understanding it correctly.
Okay, so let's give it a try. I think Aslan, who has asked that question, so does one of the government officials want to come in on that question? What are the strategies to basically roll out the commitment to local government, the federal government, the commitments made by the federal government to local government?
Korea is a relatively small country, so we have a very strong tool to engage in local governments, to central governments, administration and policies. But I'm not sure how to engage local governments in general. And but in Korea, there's lots of channels to get involved in local governments effectively. But I don't think it cannot be generalized in the context of global context.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll come in here. So I mentioned OGP has OGP local, a cohort of, some of them are cities, some of them states, provinces, or other subnational units. And just a couple of years ago, there were it was only a handful of members. We're now more than 100 members of OGP local. So there really is this appetite from local municipalities within OGP members to access the resources that OGP has in the process and follow their own process rather than be subject to the federal government giving direction and being dependent on their own action plan. Cities can make their own action plan and respond to their own citizens' needs. So that demand is there, and many OGP members are already making use of it.
And unless somebody else wants to come in on that question, maybe the next question would also go already to you. There's a question on how can we reduce, or can we reduce money laundering across borders by using open government partnership effectively?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Cross-border money laundering, I think this is an area where we've seen just the momentum increasing year by year in the last 5 or 6 years. The beneficial ownership process, which I mentioned, has really been one of the key ways to crack down on this. So being able to see who is actually the ultimate owner of an asset, whether that's a company or even yachts, which have been in the news recently. Being able to see who these the ultimate owners are really is one of the best ways to crack down on cross-border money laundering. Now, there are limitations unless there is a joined-up approach, and that's why I mentioned this ambition to try and make a global norm on how that approach to beneficial ownership looks. It involves making sure that countries use standardized data so that the registers in one country can be compared with a register in another country. You can download it in machine-readable format, and you can compare in a way so that there really is nowhere to hide for those corrupt assets.
Thank you very much. And I realize we come to the end of the Q&A. There's one last question about bureaucratic reforms for fighting corruption, and that open data transparency needs to be supported by reforms, public reforms. And I think we've heard from all participants today, from the panelists, how important that is, and the efforts that have been made both by civil society and by governments to drive these reforms forward. So with that, I thank you. Thank the participants for their presentations. It was very informative, and thank you all for your participation as well.
What an interesting discussion we have this afternoon in this first session. Now we shall take refreshment break before starting the second session of this workshop. Refreshments are served in the foyer, and so we will see you again in this room at 15 at 4 p.m. at 3 p.m. Thank you. So see you again in this room at 4 p.m. Bali time. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, as we are about to begin, please be seated. The workshop will continue in 2 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, as we are about to begin, please be seated. Kosong banget depan sih. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoy the coffee and snacks and feeling refreshed now. We proceed the second session of the workshop. This session will be guided by Ms. Marian Baraclave as the moderator. Ms. Marian is Director of the International Anti-Corruption Section in the Attorney General Department of Australia. Ms. Marian is also member of Australia's Bribery Prevention Network, a collective action initiative that brings together government, the private sector, the civil society with the aim of strengthening small enterprises' awareness of bribery and corruption risk. We invite the moderator to come to the stage. The floor is yours.
Dan selamat sore semua. Good afternoon and welcome back to the second session of the G20 Anti-Corruption Working Group side event. Thank you for being here. The second session today will be focused on promoting education on ethics and integrity to prevent corruption. And we'll shortly be joined by 4 speakers, both in person and online, who will be sharing their insights on the implementation of effective educational programs related to ethics and integrity. So we'll be hearing some really interesting examples, further to the examples shared by our colleague from Korea in the earlier session, relating to ethics and integrity. And we'll be hearing about also how anti-corruption values can be embedded through teaching in schools and universities, how young people can be engaged, and also the use of information and communications technology, ICTs, as well. After the presentations, as we saw in the first session, there'll also be some time for Q&A with the speakers. And as you listen to the presentations today, I encourage you not only to think about the questions for the speakers, but also to reflect on what good practices and innovations that you might be able to apply also to your organisations and to your communities to strengthen anti-corruption education and culture of integrities as well. So I'll now invite our speakers who are here in person to join me on the stage, and we'll get started very soon. Thank you for joining me. So we have today Ms. Lulua Assad online. We have also Ms. Lee joining us online as well. And today on the stage we have Mr. Khaled Boubshait and Mr. Rama Handoko. So thank you. I will introduce the speakers as we move through their presentations. Our first speaker today is Ms. Lulua Assad, who is a crime prevention and criminal justice officer at the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime. Ms. Lulua coordinates UNODC's Education for Justice initiative at the primary education level. And Ms. Lulua also manages activities under the UNODC UNESCO Partnership on Global Citizen Education. And she's joining us virtually, and I invite her to now begin her presentation. Over to you, Ms. Lulua. I'll just do a quick sound check. Can you hear us? We might move to start perhaps with our second speaker today, Mr. Khaled Boubshait. I'll just pause, sorry, for a moment and see if Ms. Lulua Assad has been able to. No, we'll start with Mr. Khaled Boubshait. So Mr. Khaled Boubshait is an international relations specialist from the Oversight and Anti-Corruption Authority in Saudi Arabia. We're delighted that you could make it here today in person. Mr. Boubshait is responsible for supporting the Oversight and Anti-Corruption Authority to develop partnerships with counterparts and international organisations, and takes part in the International Anti-Corruption Academy's global program on measuring corruption. Please, Mr. Boubshait, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I'd like to first thank the Indonesian presidency for giving us the opportunity to speak on the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's best practices in anti-corruption education programs. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. Well, first, I just want to say that I think, you know, the G20 is a great way to broadcast a country's efforts in fighting corruption. But my presentation is going to be more of learning on how to implement, you know, these education programs within the society, you know, for us to take part and learn from each other. So today, you're going to receive an overview of our mandates to implement these education programs, what our community programs are, what our youth programs are, and the programs we have for the public and private sector. There'll also be just a small brief on what we're doing on the international level in terms of, you know, building capacity for everyone who is fighting corruption. Next slide, please. Okay. So we all understand that political will is important. Under the leadership of Saudi Arabia, the king and the crown prince, they both take fighting corruption very seriously. And through the leadership of our minister of the Oversight and Anti-Corruption Authority, we implement Saudi Arabia's national strategy for maintaining integrity and combating corruption. We also, launched by the Saudi government, have the Vision 2030, where this vision is implemented across all government sectors. They implement transparency, integrity, and anti-corruption in all of the programs that they're doing. Next slide, please. Okay. So as Nazaha, the Oversight and Anti-Corruption Authority, is responsible for maintaining and fighting corruption, and in line with this Vision 2030, we've dedicated our time and resources to promote a culture of integrity among our society as a religious, national, and moral duty. We also firmly believe that the youth are the key holders to our country's sustainability, and empowering their minds to grow and develop with integrity as a norm is something that is believed to enhance this opportunity of sustainability. With Nazaha's partnership with the Ministry of Education, we go ahead and we include vocabulary of integrity, how to fight corruption, and ways that these young students can go about their lives to maintain that integrity with whatever they're taking, whether it's in their job, whether it's in their day-to-day activities with their peers or something like that. We believe that by doing this, like for the youth, will assist us in the front line of fighting corruption, because they're our future. They're going to be the ones to take over once we're out of the office, kind of thing. So if they have this integrity, we believe that this is a solid foundation to help us fight the corruption. Next slide, please. Okay. So we do have many types of programs in Saudi Arabia to help maintain integrity and fight corruption amongst our youth. So we have the We Apply. It's We Apply Integrity, Values, and Application. It is used to build the capacity of male and female students by training them on specific values such as honesty, citizenship, and preservation of public property. We also have the Nazaha Clubs. Nazaha Clubs was established by the Oversight and Anti-Corruption Authority, where we involve university students in implementing anti-corruption awareness amongst their peers. We also have the Ain platform. It utilizes modern technology innovations to provide knowledge to students, parents, and teachers at all levels. In this platform, there's an integrity awareness page. It's created to enhance the self-learning of the students and raise awareness on integrity values that, you know, we hope that they would go about their lives with. Furthermore, and this is actually my favorite one, it's the Durub platform. We integrate, so the Durub platform is a platform where young members of society, newly fresh graduates, can go and take training courses on the things that the job market needs, basically. Like, okay, if you want to go into finance, they have these trainings on finance, business, and so on. But with each training course or seminar that these students are going to take, we integrate integrity into it. How to maintain your integrity within the job or the career path you're looking to go through. Next slide, please. Okay. We have the demand and supply side of corruption, and within the private sector, we find it really important to extend our outreach to the private sector. And so what we do is we work side by side with the private sector, especially where there's high risks of corruption, in order to help develop things like their codes of conduct, things like their behaviors, their ethics, their integrity, through developing, we have policies and procedures to help warn against corruption. And then we have the Integrity Training Center. The Integrity Training Center is something that Nazaha has established for all public sector employees. Basically, through its partnership with international organizations, relevant, of course, such as the World Bank, the IMF, IACA, UNODC, the UNDP, we partner with these organizations to try and create workshops, seminars, training courses on up-to-date methods of implementing ways of maintaining their integrity within, the public sector. The next slide, please. Okay, and then we have our public engagement. Our best practices are implemented at all levels of society. We understand that, I just spoke about all of the things we have in our educational institutes, and we acknowledge that maybe not everyone is going to get an education, but we still want to reach out to them and tell them about our anti-corruption efforts and ways to maintain their integrity. So, of course, we utilize things such as the social media, we utilize things such as nationwide text messaging, and what this does, what it informs the public of is what we've done, ways, of course, to maintain your integrity, and who can you call if you ever are confronted with a situation dealing with corruption. We have like our contact information on these nationwide text messages. Next slide, please. Okay, and this is at the international level. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia believes firmly in the input of experts of academia. So during the Saudi G20 presidency of 2020, Saudi Arabia developed the Academia 20. And basically they sat there and they gave the ACWG a list of recommendations on how to better fight corruption. So one of those recommendations is to develop a way to better measure corruption within each individual country and the world as a whole. So Nazaha, the Oversight and Anti-Corruption Authority of Saudi Arabia, has partnered with IACA to develop an evidence-based methodology to measure corruption. So we understand that there isn't one way to fight corruption. Everybody has different types of legal systems. They have different ways of running their country. So what this is planning to do is to see how they're doing it and measure the progress, measure the success of how a country is fighting for all of us to learn. They're going to give recommendations on what a country could better do to fight corruption. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a list here of all of the previous platforms and initiatives that I just recently spoke about, if any of you, would be interested in learning more about them. Next, please. Oh, thank you. Okay. No, sorry. Okay. I do hope that you took something away from this presentation. And of course, we do hope for a very successful meeting within the upcoming days. And again, I'd like to thank the Indonesian presidency for giving us the opportunity to present to you our efforts in fighting corruption within educational programs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boopshade, for your presentation. Some really important messages in there, noting the focus on youth empowerment, the importance of embedding integrity in training courses for career paths, for example, a very interesting and useful way of embedding kind of a culture of integrity in a very practical way. And I also, the messages about education not only being about imparting information, but also about awareness raising for where to go for more information. I mean, we all know that corruption, anti-corruption, combating corruption can present many grey areas, and it's not always very clear-cut, you know, what steps to take in certain situations. And I think the message of also education about where to go for more information and where to go for guidance is also very, very important. It's not just about giving the answers, it's about giving those resources as well. So thank you very much. We will now move on to Mr. Rama Handoko's presentation. Thank you for joining us today. Mr. Rama Handoko is an anti-corruption education specialist in the Corruption Eradication Commission, the KPK, in Indonesia. Mr. Handoko is responsible for developing anti-corruption education and training material for government officials and monitors anti-corruption education implementation in primary and secondary education. So thank you, Mr. Handoko. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Good afternoon, Excellencies and colleagues. First of all, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to share the KPK program on anti-corruption education. In my presentation today, I will also share our efforts in developing and implementing educational programs on ethics and integrity in Indonesia. This also includes youth empowerment initiative, curricula on ethics, integrity, and anti-corruption in elementary, secondary, and higher education, and informal education approaches to promote anti-corruption culture. I will also share our experience in conducting capacity building programs that focus on enhancing the integrity of public officials. Next slide, please. I will start with 3 methods of incorporating anti-corruption values in schools. Inserting anti-corruption values into school subject was one of the commitments of the National Coordinating Meeting of Anti-Corruption Education in 2018. Most education experts realize that schools in Indonesia already have full of mandatory subjects. Many experts then thought it was not wise to add anti-corruption as a new subject. But some regions in Lampung province have decided to add anti-corruption education as their contextual learning subject. Purwakarta regions of West Java also use their local wisdom as learning subject. The program called 7 Poi Atikan, or 7 days of learning. That means they'll never stop learning about anti-corruption culture. Most importantly, by acclamation, most experts recommend teaching and practicing anti-corruption values as hidden curricula activities, including role modeling from any adults in education environment. Next slide. This is our guidebooks for teachers to implement anti-corruption education. Most of all, it encourages teachers to start from themselves, to be a role model. If they want their students not to come late, they can come late forever. Next slide, please. This is to documentation of our visit to the left one is in Bali. Elementary school in Bali have culture to pray to their knowledge God every day in the morning. So they knew if they pray before they study, they will study with their heart. And the right one is documentation from junior high school in Surakarta, West Java. They have habituation in schools that encourage every member in the school to implement anti-corruption education. Next slide. Implementation of anti-corruption education in universities is conducted through several methods. First, anti-corruption values and type of corruption offenses are mainly integrated into civic education subject as part of general compulsory courses, in addition to Bahasa Indonesia and religion subjects. This has been regulated by the Minister of Education, Culture, Research and Technology. The regulation of the Minister of Research, Technology and Higher Education number 33 of 2019, all universities have the authority to develop an anti-corruption subject as a compulsory or elective course. The subject on anti-corruption in each university has different names. An example, in Bandung Institute of Technology, they call it anti-corruption course. In Ministry of Health State University, they call the course with anti-corruption culture education. In Tadulako University of Palu, they call it with character education and anti-corruption course. In Hasanuddin University, South Sulawesi, they call it with criminal law of corruption course. In Udayana University of Denpasar, here in Bali, the subject, the course is criminal act of corruption course. And in University of Siliwangi, it called anti-plagiarism and anti-corruption education course. So the anti-corruption education is freely to choose by every universities in Indonesia. Most of all, implementing anti-corruption education is also part of implementation of 3 pillars of higher education, such as developing anti-corruption research or study center, community service program, or a pool of experts. Next slide. This is the guidebooks. The left one is the guidebook for lecturers, created by the Minister of Education, Culture, Research and Technology. The second one is created and developed by KPK. It's for inserting anti-corruption education in civic education subject in universities. The left, the third and the fourth is e-flyer for an activity in 2016 and 2017 called Campus Festival Integrity. They encourage students, college students, to develop creatively material and message related to anti-corruption. So their colleagues, every students know about the anti-corruption movement. Next slide, please. To enhance the capacity of teachers and lecturers on anti-corruption issues and to standardize anti-corruption education, KPK conducts anti-corruption training for teachers and lecturers and encourage them to apply for anti-corruption instructor certification. Next slide. The left one is a training session for elementary and secondary teachers. The right one is online seminars held by anti-corruption instructors about their role to develop their workplace to be free of corruption case. Next slide. This one is about jaga.id. In 2019, KPK developed a web module to monitoring and evaluating anti-corruption education implementation in formal education in jaga.id. Jaga means to keep everyone or someone or something safe. Jaga is the word of keep something or someone safe. So the platform is called jaga.id. A platform to support prevention of corruption and enhance transparency in public services and government asset management. Jaga.id integrates elementary and secondary education anti-corruption education implementation data between Indonesia's Ministry of Education, Culture, Research and Technology data. We call it Dapodik. Islamic elementary, secondary and higher education data of Indonesia's Ministry of Religious Affairs. We call it EMIS. And also Higher Education Data Center of Ministry of Education, Culture, Research and Technology. So the stakeholders do not entry the data repeatedly. So we integrate the data to make them more easy to report. Next slide. In 2020, more than 400 schools around the nation started to report their anti-corruption education implementation to jaga.id. Education office in the regions especially created their accounts in jaga.id. Some of the implementation were already marked as best practices. They might be used as a reference for other schools besides pre-uploaded digital learning resource at the Anti-Corruption Education Cloud directory, such as PDF books, anti-corruption related videos and films, anti-corruption songs, etc. In supporting anti-corruption education stakeholders, KPK conducts online capacity building programs and training on anti-corruption values, school integrity, and online class teaching technique. Next slide. This is the list of school reports. There are almost 400 and more reports, and some of them is marked as best practices, and we rewrite the story and upload it in education and public participation portal. Next slide. As COVID-19 pandemic started in 2020, all human activities were forced to use online resource to conduct our regular pre-pandemic routines, including KPK, in the context of informal education approaches to promote anti-corruption culture. KPK start to optimizing the use of ICTs as above-the-line anti-corruption campaign media to reach a broader audience through outdoor advertisement, even microsite, search engine optimization. The campaign is also conducted in below-the-line media to reach a targeted audience directly through digital community development, webinar series, key opinion leader digital forum, etc. Fortunately, anti-corruption media such as films, videos, streaming service, and public service announcements are getting more attention with the increasing of online activities. Next slide. The left one is the promotion of anti-corruption film festival. KPK is regularly held anti-corruption film festival, so we can be like South Korean, Mr. Won. So maybe in 30 or 15 years ahead, we have filmmakers that willingly insert anti-corruption content in their films and drama. The right one is a webinar about anti-corruption for universities students. Next slide. The increasing online activities of KPK stakeholders in the pandemic are also advantages. KPK developed anti-corruption education learning for university students and teaching staff. Some universities use those e-learning as part of delivery of anti-corruption courses. E-learning also target a private sectors, civil servants, political stakeholders, and communities. Monitoring the anti-corruption instructor activity post-certification is also more manageable by using a mobile app called accesskuinteraksi.id. KPK continued to optimizing the use of education and public participation portal. It is aclc.kpk.go.id as a center of information, data, teaching materials, anti-corruption supporting media, which are divided according to themes and sectors. Also, the use of social media as a source of anti-corruption information. Next slide. This is the learning management system of KPK. So universities can use it as part of their course, their anti-corruption education courses. Next slide. Anti-corruption education for high-ranks officials is divided into formal and informal training. Formal anti-corruption education subject for high-level government official training is conducted by public administration agency. They were customized to meet the latest government official core values called berakhlak, with a new tagline, proud to serve. Insertion of anti-corruption education on first level national leaders training program is in ethic and integrity subject. The training is for government official top leaders to actuate as a role model in implementing code of conduct and integrity in the workplace. Insertion of anti-corruption education topic on second level national leader training program is in integrity leadership subject. This training is for government official second top leaders to develop strategic organization plans on integrity programs. Both trainings are 9 hours study and delivered in an online and offline class method. Okay, I will more faster. Next slide. Next slide. This is Paku Integritas, an informal training course for high-rank public official held by KPK. There's two informal training for high-rank official that held by KPK. One is Paku Integritas. It's for top ranks, direct subordinates of the minister or head of the institution. The second is Prestasi. Prestasi is also informal training for class or for managers, supervisors, and lead administrators of government officials. The interesting, the Prestasi includes training course to implement the participants' action plan. The materials studied are corruption offenses, integrity temptation, integrity dilemma, corruption risk assessment, and the actualization of integrity, which were delivered by several competent instructors. There is one session where they visit KPK detention center. So they can observe and experience life inside the KPK detention center. So that's the interesting about prestasi. And the last thing, as a reward, professional certification will be given to high-rank officials who are proven to maintain an integrity system in their workplace. It's called Chief Integrity Officer Certification. The certification is delivered by KPK in coordination with National Agency for Professional Certification. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you and for your kind attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. A lot of really excellent examples there of both formal and informal forms of education. Really wonderful to see visually the resources that are available in Indonesia, and also to highlight the role of informal education as well through role modelling and embedding those values in every day. And I think many of us would share that interest in combining entertainment with anti-corruption education as well. We're now going to move to our speaker online, Ms. Lulua Assad. And I'll just briefly introduce Ms. Lulua again. Ms. Lulua is a crime prevention and criminal justice officer at the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime. Ms. Lulua coordinates UNODC's Education for Justice initiative at the primary education level and manages activities under the UNODC UNESCO Partnership on Global Citizenship Education. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Lulua. I hope you can hear us, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much. Good morning from Vienna. It's a pleasure for me to be here speaking today. And actually, I feel all of the presentations and interventions are all connected to each other. And I really liked also what Mr. Handoko presented and the comprehensive and innovative actually approaches working with within the formal and informal also education sector and leveraging the advancements also of technologies for learning. Of course, the presentation here today, I would like to introduce the GRACE initiative, which is a newly launched initiative by UNODC, by the Corruption Economic Crime Branch. We launched the initiative during the 9th session of the Conference of States Parties, which was held in Sharm el-Sheikh in December 2021. And this initiative builds on years of experience in the area of education and youth empowerment, where we've been basically working with member states and different parts of the world to strengthen education on the rule of law and on ethics and integrity. Next slide, please. So the mission of GRACE is to create a culture of rejection of corruption among children and youth by harnessing the transformational power of education and partnerships. What also we would, one of the things also that we really focus on is how do we work with children and with youth starting early in their academic journey, from primary level, secondary, and also tertiary, and also promoting this concept of lifelong learning on ethics and integrity. And of course, learning about integrity, ethical and honest behaviors, and how to apply these values to the choices the young generation make every day constitute the building blocks to prepare children to be change makers and contribute to the creation of a more inclusive, just and peaceful world. And for us also, we work we work with different sectors within also countries. We work with educators, we support also parents, and we also work with the non-governmental organizations, civil society organizations, and also youth. And we would This education equation has to be also implemented in a multi-stakeholder approach in order to actually find sustainable solutions as well when it comes to promoting education on ethics and integrity. Next slide, please. So GRACE initiative is structured along 3 core thematic areas. The first thematic area focuses on primary and secondary education, meaning K to 12, looking at working here closely with the ministries of education, but not only that, but we also work with teacher training institutes, we also work with anti-corruption authorities, the media, NGOs, and also youth, because it's very important to have the different also counterparts at the national level find ways in which to also strengthen their efforts and complement them as well while targeting children and youth. With regards to the second pillar, which is on academia and research, here we focus on empowering academics through providing knowledge tools and resources that have been peer developed by academics from all over the world, and also we work on contextualizing them or regionalizing or also giving it a regional perspective. For example, when it comes to the rollout and bringing academics together to empower them to teach on anti-corruption, ethics and integrity. Not only that, but also to integrate them in different disciplines. And here we also promote research on different topics when it comes to anti-corruption or ethics and integrity in different languages as well, so to ensure that also research can advise as well policy. And with this component, with the tools that we have developed, which I invite actually all of you to visit our website, we have the tools available, and these tools could also be used for professional training as well of practitioners. They include a variety of different interactive ways to engage learners. I will also show it closely in the other slide. With the component on youth empowerment, here we focus on empowering youth through different innovative projects, whether through, like Mr. also Handoko has presented, whether through using ICT, for example, for learning, whether through empowering them through training, networking opportunities, but also to actually engage with youth and hear from youth as well as to how do they think that we could actually provide them with the avenue to voice their opinions and also find solutions that take into account also their concerns. Next slide, please. How does GRACE, the GRACE initiative, contribute to the global agendas? Of course, we focus, our main area of work is focuses on SDG 16 when it comes to corruption. But of course, due to the mutually reinforcing relationship of the Sustainable Development Agenda, here it's also important to look at these 2 goals, which is Goal 16 and Goal 4. And I would like here to refer also to one of the recent reports that was published also with UNESCO, in which we have a strong partnership with, and it's the report on futures of education. There has been, of course, great achievements in access to education that it has been reached in the last 70 years. The enrollment, however, I wanted to point out some statistics. So enrollment in 2020 surpassed 90% in primary, 85% in lower secondary, and 65% in upper secondary. This happened despite the incredible speed in population growth. So here we're looking at enrollment in schools, but yet access to education does not mean quality education, which remains incomplete and inadequate. So education is not yet fulfilling its promise to help us shape peaceful, just and sustainable futures. We live in a world which demands for civic and economic participation, which has become ever more complex. So our formal and informal education systems must meet these demands. So beyond gaps in these basic literacies of reading, math, and science, there are gaps as well when it comes to civic literacy, global competencies, and socio-emotional competencies. And when it comes to teaching on ethics and integrity, particularly at the primary and secondary level, there's a lot of it that deals with socio and emotional competencies and teaching these values. And we need to ensure that the education system meets these demands. And it is in these scenarios that the GRACE initiative can be placed. So what we really focus on is ensuring the provision of quality education on values that also supports promoting peaceful, just and strong institutions. Next slide, please. So I also wanted to refer here to target 4.4, and this target in the Sustainable Development Agenda, it really focuses on increasing the number of youth and adults who have relevant skills, including technical and vocational skills for employment, decent jobs, and entrepreneurship. And of course, we cannot have achieve this target and thinking about how we are creating a generation that will become the future entrepreneurs, the future politicians, the future business owners, without actually empowering them with these skills, with the knowledge, with the tools that they need in order to also uphold a culture that rejects corruption. Next slide, please. Building on experience. As I mentioned earlier, at UNODC, we've been working in the area of education and youth empowerment for years. And what is also unique with us at the Corruption and Economic Crime Branch, we have also our UNODC field offices where we are working on the ground together with our anti-corruption advisors, with member states, and designing also programs and projects that also meet the needs that were identified on the ground. And currently, since the launch of GRACE, we've been working with over 7 countries right now. We just launched GRACE, as I mentioned, in December. But also our tools are widely disseminated. They're also available for use and available in different languages. We also find it important that we try to focus on upscaling the capacity as well of teachers to understand what kind of experience they can bring to the classroom, how they can become also role models for teachers, and how role model for children in the classroom, and how to mirror also these values within the classroom. And within the next slide, please. And with the next slide here on primary education, which basically showcases some of the tools we have at the primary level. And here, these resources, we disseminate them for policymakers, teachers, families, and students. We have a series of lesson plans, for example, that could be used by teachers, also by different constituencies as well, and different stakeholders that are interested on teaching on ethics and integrity. In different disciplines or different subjects. For example, when it comes to primary education, it could be within civic education, it could be within a language course, within PE or history. So the teachers could take these tools, which are very flexible in nature, and plug them into existing classes, and they are very easily navigatable. They could be they're clear for teachers, and based on that, we deliver also capacity building for teachers and teacher trainers, so that they could also disseminate them and use them as well. And these tools and resources, they refer to a variety of other tools and resources. For example, it could be videos such as cartoons, comic books, as well as games, and innovative and creative ways of also working with children in the classroom. And of course, for this, it's very important here when it comes to primary education is also to think, how do we bring the world into the classroom for children? What do they need to know? They also need to think local and act global, understand also that they don't live in isolation, and all of these challenges as well are can be also changed and challenged. So of course, it's a process starting from 6 years old as we move through the academic journey of students. It's important here to also think of other innovative ways of working with children, whether through art competitions, music, theater, and performances, to also make the learning journey itself more dynamic and more entertaining, which is very important, as the new generation now also needs that due to their exposure as well to information technologies and to the fast-paced environment that we currently live in. Next slide, please. So this is also our component, which is on secondary education. Of course, as we move through the academic journey here, our target is to empower young people to become socially responsible global citizens with a strong moral and ethical compass. There are different tools and resources to educate on ethics and integrity. Some of these tools are aimed at teachers, while others are aimed at students themselves, including board games and videos as resources that can be used to have more meaningful discussions on issues that are related to ethics, integrity, and the rule of law in general. We have, for example, on our website, a video and teacher's guide, which helps secondary school students aged 13 to 18 to understand the meaning and consequences of corruption and other acts related to it, and to adopt a critical attitude towards these practices. And this guide has been designed to help secondary school teachers extend the content of the video, and it contains recommendations for good practices and educational strategies that can be applied as well while using the video in the classroom. And in the absence of technology in the classroom, there are also other options. So here this demonstrates as well how education can be used to promote these values, but also in using different tools, different resources, and different ways of learning. And of course, for us, comics as well can have a transformative power to help young learners better understand some of these major threats facing basically the international community, such as corruption and challenges to the rule of law. And they have a very universal visual language, and they have the ability also to connect with the reader in a very unique way, and making them actually question critically and look at these issues in a very critical way, which is an important skill as well to develop among children and youth. Next slide, please. So for tertiary education, we have two module series, one on anti-corruption and one is on ethics and integrity. And our actions is to develop knowledge tools and educational materials for university lecturers and trainers. We also work on enhancing the capacity of tertiary education institutions to teach and conduct research on anti-corruption. And we also facilitate the exchange of knowledge and good practices in the area of education and research on anti-corruption, integrity, and ethics. I think I have just I will go quickly now. Next slide, please. So for tertiary education, again, I mean, this is a testimony from one of our professors that we have worked on from a university in Nigeria. I would like actually to move to the next slide, which is our Coding for Integrity Hackathon. And this is one of the examples where we work in an innovative way. We leverage the advancements of information technology for learning. We had different teams come together. Last year, we organized a Coding for Integrity Hackathon targeting 5 countries in Africa. And this was a way also to empower students who are studying information technology, information science, or computer science, or coding, to actually learn about issues that are related to corruption and how they could apply this and how they could actually code and program and find innovative also applications and programs that targets these issues. Next slide, please. One of also our innovative projects is our youth-led integrity advisory board, which brings together 25 youth from different parts of the world who are acting as our advisors, because it's important to consider that no solution that targets youth should be developed and conceptualized without actually consulting with youth. And youth have been playing an active role in also supporting their governments and supporting as well the international community when it comes to the fight against corruption. Next slide. This is a video that we just wanted to show, and this video we played it actually during the UNESCO Education Summit. It's by one of our youth-led integrity board members. Her name is Serena Ibrahim, and she is running an NGO in Lebanon, Youth Against Corruption, and she had a small message to share with the international community during the UNESCO Education Summit.
but perhaps you could tell us where we are able to find the video online.
I can't hear the video, but the video is with Fira, so from my side, I'm not able to control it. But I mean, I guess there's a problem with the audio, but I mean, we're happy to share this video later, but she speaks about the importance of promoting ethics and integrity and teaching on it as well at different levels of education. Next slide, please. And lastly, this is also one of our youth-led integrity advisory board member, and she was also speaking 2 weeks ago at the European Development Days. And for the first time, we managed to actually bring the topic of corruption, of ethics and integrity to the attention also of when it came on discussing important topics and global challenges as well. And she was basically present there, speaking about the importance of teaching on ethics, integrity at the tertiary level, and also empowering youth to act as agents of change and to work with their governments and authorities to promote anti-corruption education. I mean, with this, I conclude my presentation, and of course, with Grace, I would invite everyone to see the website and visit our website and see the resources and tools that we have. And the idea is that we have also, they are available in different languages. We are able to contextualize and localize also these different tools to suit the different realities on the ground, working with the different stakeholders and ensuring also that we create dialogue as well at the national level to ensure a sustainable and a well-coordinated approach. Thank you.
We heard about some very interesting and engaging tools across primary, secondary and tertiary levels, and certainly encourage everyone to look more at those resources and the videos available through the UNODC website as well. We come to our final speaker in this session today. Our final speaker will be Ms. Li, who is a professor on integrity and ethics at the Chinese University of Political Science and Law. Ms. Li is joining us virtually today. And Ms. Li's work has focused on corruption and anti-corruption efforts. Ms. Li is a member of the Asian Journal of Criminology and has published research, journal papers, books and book chapters in both Chinese and English. Welcome, Ms. Li, and invite you to commence your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, moderator. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. I would like first to thank the contributors to this workshop who organized us to here. And I have got a lot of good experience and ideas from the speakers. Today, I will share the topic about integrating anti-corruption and the integrity elements into teaching materials and curricula in China. Next, please. I will introduce the following 3 parts. First, I will introduce the general conditions on the moral education in China. Second, I will show the experience how to integrate anti-corruption elements into school curricula in China. And finally, I will introduce the new way to explore anti-corruption education in university in China. Next, please. First, I will introduce the general conditions on moral education in China. Next, please. At this part, I will share the following 3 points. Next, please. First, let's look at the policy in China. As we all know, since from 2005, according to the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, the Chinese government highlights the moral education. You can find on moral education. And further, in 2008, the Ministry of Education had helped schools to adopt various methods to explore moral issues. And then, in 2013, a set of approach to integrate the moral education into the whole school curriculum have been applied, and to help the pupils to build up awareness of integrity in school. Next, please. Based on the support from the government, the network on moral education has been set up in China. The network includes primary school, secondary school, and college and universities. And the next, please. So far, there are different program packages deal with themes related to ethics and social values, such as the sense of responsibility, respect for the rule abiding, regard for the justice and fairness, regard for truth and honesty, awareness of rights and obligations, and so on. Based on this, I will introduce the following part. Next, please. And the second part, I will introduce something about how to integrate anti-corruption elements into school curricula. Next, please. This part, I will show the 3 points. And the next, please. First, we can look at the current program packages for primary and secondary schools in China. You can see this table. In different age students, there are different courses. For example, for the grade 1 to grade 2 in primary school students, the courses will highlight moral judgment and good behavior habit. And for the grade 3 to grade 6, the courses will emphasize the awareness of fairness, justice, law abiding. And for those in grade 7 to grade 9, in the secondary school students, the course will highlight concern for the community, sense of citizens' rights, integrity, and sense of responsibility, and so on. And particularly the Chinese courses and history courses both employ unique ways to integrate these anti-corruption elements into it. So next, please. 2 ways employed to make the unique Chinese course and history courses more efficient. The first one brings the traditional culture into the courses. In China, from primary and secondary school, the teacher uses the pupil-centered activities to help pupils apply rational attitudes to ethical issues. There are some cases, for example, it incorporates the Chinese Confucian values and the Chinese traditional culture on integrity into the Chinese courses. Okay, next, please. And another way, the teacher taking the history stories and the heroes into the courses. There are lots of famous stories and heroes on integrity in Chinese history. Taking them into the courses aims to stimulate students' reflection on personal responsibility and to strengthen their ability for moral judgment. There also has many cases. For example, Han Rui is a very famous official in Ming Dynasty in China for his clean and integrity. It has been integrated into the grade 7 Chinese courses. Okay, next please. Besides the courses in primary and secondary school, today I will introduce more something about the moral education for college students in China. Next, please. In China, for the college and university students, both inside and outside the formal education system employed. Next, please. First, we look at the table. Both inside and outside moral education system are employed for the college students, and both of them are focused on activities-oriented system. And so we will look at first the outside system. Next, please. So there are many outside activities for clean and integrity. And there is a famous case. The case is the cultural works of clean government in college and university project. It has been implemented continually since from 2012. And on average, more than 1,000 colleges and universities have been involved in each session, with more than 200,000 participants. A total of more than 75,000 works were submitted, and lots of excellent works were displayed online. So next, please. So here are some award winning works. You can find them very interesting and very excellent. Okay, next, please. On the other hand, besides the outside system, I will focus more something about the inside discipline-driven system in today China's college and universities. As we all know, there are some anti-corruption courses or legal courses. They are fragmented and simple. No systematic knowledge of courses on the corruption and anti-corruption in China. So a new proposal about the new academic discipline in China has been set up since from 2021. Now, the Academic Degree Committee of the State Council has approved the proposal. Fortunately, the pilot programs was first conducted in China University of Political Science and Law. As a teacher of the CUPL, I'm familiar with the progress. So I will introduce some details about it. Next, please. Based on inside discipline-driven system, the new academic discipline has 3 features. The first one, it shows interdiscipline features. You can say as a discipline inspection and state supervision, it has multiple disciplines. For example, law, economics, political science, sociology, public administration, criminology, all involved it. Okay, next, please. And the second feature of the new discipline is a systematic knowledge system has been set up. It from 3 levels. Focus on the general theory of discipline inspection and state supervision. And the second, focus on laws and regulation and institutional mechanisms. And the third one is focus on the practice. Okay, next, please. The third feature of the new discipline is a research degree and professional master and doctorate programs consist of both coursework and independent research studies. So as the pilot programs, the Chinese Universities of Political Science and Law has adopted a credit unit system for professional doctorate programs and professional master programs. This year, we will have the first year to adopt this unit system in our university. Okay, next, please. So, in a word, we can find education is crucial to prevent corruption and to promote transparency. Great efforts have been contributed to more education in China. It integrated various anti-corruption elements into different kinds of students. And the new initiatives on academic discipline will improve the quality of more education in China. That's all. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. That's my presentation.
Thank you very much for your presentation, and really great to hear those additional examples, adding to the examples we've heard from the speakers already about how to integrate anti-corruption values into school curricula, and including the importance of storytelling in that as well, and the power of storytelling in communicating those values. So thank you again, Ms. Lee. We've now come to the Q&A part of our session, and a chance for participation from the audience as well. So I'll start first by asking if there are any questions from audience members here today, and then I'll move to any questions that might be raised online as well. Yes, we've got a question in the second row. I don't know if we want to get a microphone. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our speakers for some really insightful presentations. I'm Emily O'Hara from the Fraud Prevention and Anti-Corruption branch in the Australian Attorney General's Department. I'd be interested in hearing from our speakers about how you seek to measure the impact of the programs that you've spoken about today, especially given the really strong emphasis on the future, and how your programs contribute to future outcomes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, a great question. I might start with our panellists here in person with us, and then move online to see if there are any additional insights as well in relation to how you measure the success of these anti-corruption programs. Yeah, Mr. Handoko.
Okay, thank you for the questions. In KPK, still in progress to develop education environment, integrity education environment. So after all we've been through to the intervention, we need to calculate the effectiveness, and we hope that after we have the index about education integrity, we hope we can have the result of the implementation and also the impact, maybe 5 or 10 years from now. Thank you.
Personally, from my experience, I've seen, I can agree with him when he says, like, as of right now, there isn't a solid way to measure the impact. All we can witness at the moment is, for example, at the Oversight and Anti-Corruption Authority, after educating our citizens on the types of corruption, we've seen a vast number of more corruption reports coming in. Meaning, so we can see that the message is getting out there from our nationwide messages, from our social media campaigns and stuff like this. I can also see that there's a huge interest in the citizens with the amount, from the programs that I mentioned. You can see more participation in these programs from students, from parents, from teachers, from across all levels of the educational field. So, I mean, we're seeing something slowly. At the moment, our efforts right now, again, this is like for the future, to put development and a foundation for the students of the future. And there. Yeah.
I'll now see if Ms. Lalua Assad from the UNODC, interested in your thoughts on measuring the impact of anti-corruption measures, education measures, and whether this is something that the GRACE initiative has been looking at as well.
Thank you very much. I mean, as I mentioned, we just launched the GRACE initiative in December last year, but we've been working for several years in the area of education. And I actually second what the panelists have been saying. So for us to change the social norms and the attitudes and behaviors, you need a generation to see that shift. But there are different ways of measuring also impact when it comes, for example, let's say with the tertiary level of education, where we worked with academics and we wanted to see how they were using our tools, what is the feedback, what is the learning experience of the students, what did they come out with, and what did they learn in the process? Did it increase their understanding or not? So sometimes we do also these surveys as well as questionnaires targeting academics, targeting also the students who have also benefited from using our tools. When it comes, sometimes also when it comes to impact assessment, let's say also some of our more innovative ways of working where we did previously under our education projects like grant schemes, for example, for NGOs, we could see on the ground that how was this implemented, what was the impact of it, what's the evaluating also the work, what were the activities implemented, how were they implemented, did we also provide training on anti-corruption measures, on ethics and integrity, what was the main and solid outcome of this? There are different ways, I think, when it comes to not anti-corruption education precisely, but anti-corruption education and activities and initiatives, and also ways of working, whether with the informal sector or non-formal sector. And in other instances as well, previously we could do comparisons, for example, if there's a school where they use our tools versus a school that did not use the tools. Did we see, for example, a shift in attitudes and behaviors or not? So it is, sometimes it's not always an incremental increase. Sometimes it is really different when it comes to measuring also impacts of educational programs, particularly that these values and skills cannot be taught overnight. So it requires a generation. So that's basically how we see it, but also we do follow sometimes certain beneficiaries throughout their, a few years. For example, previously we had some youth that we worked with in certain countries. We could see their development process. We could see, for example, it crosses my mind right now, once we were implementing really a comprehensive project in Nigeria, and we did train NGOs to disseminate our tools and to work also and volunteer and with teachers and also with schools. And following the work of these NGOs and seeing how they progressed in implementing not only our activities, but also using our tools, and to see I just saw actually one of them last week when I was in Paris for the UNESCO Education Summit, and after 7 years I could see the, how can I say, the increase in understanding these issues, the amount of contributions that this NGO has been doing and the people who work on it. So there are different ways also when you want to collect stories and you want to assess impact and evaluation. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Lee, did you have any final thoughts on this question?
Oh, sorry. So first, I think the speakers mentioned about support is very light me up. So I think the new ideas and the new ways, especially new tools employed to explore the more education is very important in future. So how to use the new ideas and the new ways, I think it's very not easy for us to explore it. I think some reforms has been tried, so we can cooperation and learn from each other. For example, in China, there are also some reforms about some more education, use some new ideas or some new tools. For example, use the ICT techniques to enhance the more education, use from the internet. But I think there are not very common model for everyone, but we can find some unique tools for us and have more many tries and practice. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those responses. I think we have a time for one more question, which will come from one of our online participants. One of our online participants has made the point that anti-corruption education not only requires a separate or dedicated curriculum or subjects on anti-corruption, but also needs role models, starting from the family, the school, community, and the government environment that can be used as positive examples for students in implementing those values in a real-world context. So the question to put to our panellists is really what in a very short statement, what would you say is one of the practical ways that we can ensure that there are role models, particularly for our students? What's one of the practical measures that you would recommend, focusing on the importance of role models? Mr. Handoko, would you like to begin?
Okay, thank you for Sony Widiawan. I think we are 100% agree about the opinion. That's why KPK start to targeting the integrity of education ecosystem. We are not only intervene in curricula, but we intervene the regulator, the parents, the school environment, their environments, student environment. So every aspect and every elements need to work together to implementing the values as a role models, as good examples, because as I mentioned before, sometimes teachers ask students not to be late, but then she or he is the one who late. That's the contradictive of our regular life in Indonesia. So KPK start to intervene every aspect, from family, school, communities, even regulators.
Thank you very much. Were there any other comments from our panellists on the importance of role models? No. Ms. Lee, Ms. Assad, any final comments on role models that you'd like to share with us?
Thank you. Yes, of course, role models, it's an important topic and an important thing to consider. And this is actually what we also promote through the GRACE initiative, particularly at the primary level. For example, our tools and resources and the training methodology as well, it explains to teachers why is it important to mirror these behaviors in the classroom. How can you actually make the classroom a model where there's a culture of transparency, integrity, and what you can do as a teacher. And also our tools and resources, it includes activities that could be done with the parents as well. So it's really important to involve different, the parents, the teachers, and also the school principals as well. They play a very important role in this regard. And this is why we really believe in the importance of training of teachers, and also and training of trainers in order to ensure also a sustainable way in delivery, and also the duplication as well, and the sharing of such expertise and knowledge.
Ms. Lee, any final comments from you?
Okay, thank you. I think it's very hard for us to find and efficient and practical measures to students, not only primary students or now the college students. For example, I am a college teacher, but also I found some legal courses and other moral education courses is not very interesting for my students in class. So also I want to find some new ways or new practical measures to improve my class. But I find neither the primary students nor the college students, they focus more on some method focus on the game-centered activities, such as you can play the games or play game with them and play games on the internet and so on. So, but I think it's not very easy for us to find the best way, but we can have a try. Yeah. Thank you very much.
We'll leave the formal session on Q&A there for now, but if you have any further questions, either online participants or participants here today, please reach out to the speakers, and I'm sure they'll be happy to answer any other questions that you have. In summing up today's session, firstly, thank you very much to our speakers who've joined us today in person and online. We've heard about the importance of formal and informal anti-corruption education initiatives. We've heard about the GRACE initiative, and also very important to note those linkages with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We've heard the value of integrating anti-corruption values in different disciplines, and the importance of ICTs and interactive learning, particularly for that youth empowerment aspect. And we've also started to have that discussion about measuring success and bearing in mind that, of course, it has a long-term perspective, but that there are ways of measuring short-term success on initiatives. So thank you very much for your questions. Thank you very much again for the speakers. And I think another round of applause to thank yous.
Interesting discussion today. We finally come to the end of our agenda today. So, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, to officially close the workshop, closing remarks will be delivered by Chair of the G20 Acwg, Bapak Muhammad Hadiana.
Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by thanking all of the panelists for their insightful presentation and for the moderators for bringing this event to life with a lively discussion. I would also like to thank the participants for attending this event, whether virtual or in person. We have a very productive event and fruitful discussion. We share many good practices, discuss challenges, and identify solutions through a frank and open exchange of views. It is in this reason why events such as this is important. This event was a success in terms of gathering ideas, initiative, and presentation from various anti-corruption organizations and practitioners. Not only that, we were able to discuss the importance of instilling integrity and ethical values in children and youth through education as a critical step in the fight against corruption. I do not want to draw any conclusion because this has been done by moderators. Okay. Nonetheless, we are in agreement that corruption is a widespread threat and that only through collaboration from across sectors, stakeholders, boundaries, and jurisdiction will effort to combat corruption be successful. We also agree that public participation in the fight against corruption is crucial. Each of us must become an agent of change. Ethics and integrity should be part of our daily lives. As a result, nurturing them at an early stage is important if they are to become a culture of integrity. I do not think we should stop here. And on the contrary, we must move this agenda forward. The G20 countries should set an example and strengthen our efforts to raise anti-corruption awareness among youth and cultivate an integrity culture, which includes, among other things, anti-corruption education and research, training, and awareness-raising activities. As a result, the ACWG Indonesian presidency introduces the good practices compiled in Compendium on Public Participation and Anti-Corruption Education Program. This compendium will provide successful example of innovation and approaches on enhancing the participation of society in the effort to fight corruption. Furthermore, it also provides country experiences in promoting quality education on ethics and integrity to prevent corruption. We are confident that this deliverable will be beneficial not only to G20 members, but also to non-member countries. In this opportunity, we would also like to express our appreciation for countries and international organizations who have provided input and suggestions to the compendium as one of our deliverables for the ACWG this year. To close, allow me to also thank the team and the organizer, without whom this workshop would not have been possible. Let us work together to fight corruption. I thank you.
Thank you, Bapak Muhammad Hadiana. Thank you to all of us. See you again in the next occasion. Good evening, everyone.